Way of Cognitive Reframing. What is cognitive reframing? It is looking at the same situation from a different point of view or through a different lens, like putting on rose-colored glasses. The problem is that most people look at any given situation in a very predictable, high-probability way based on their past conditioning and mood. Whereas, in reality, a situation can be viewed from many different perspectives. And the way you look at a situation can make all the difference in the world in terms of how you feel and your resultant stress, health, and immunity. Here is a concrete metaphor. Imagine a man conversing with a woman from the visual perspective of the man. We then watch the same conversation from the vantage point of the woman looking at the man. We then switch to a drone's perspective, watching them both from directly above. Lastly, we switch to another drone's perspective, watching them both from the side. Thus, we are afforded many different views of exactly the same event, all equally valid and true, but potentially invoking very different responses depending upon the view. Each perspective contains elements or factors which may not be visible from other angles, which contributes to the distinct emotional response particular to each distinct view. For example, from one perspective, a flying dinosaur is visible, whereas from other angles, this creature can't be seen, but instead another entity or object is perceived. So each view may suggest considerations which may not have occurred or dawned upon us from the perspective of other views. The omission of such considerations may lead to wrong conclusions and faulty thinking because our processing of a situation was based on distorted and/or incomplete data. Garbage in, garbage out. Data is distorted by seeing it through rose or other colored glasses. Data is incomplete because certain factors, only visible through certain perspectives, did not get included in the computation. In this light, it may be useful to label or crystallize various reframing perspectives into symbols and short code phrases so that they may be remembered, invoked, and applied in a ready-made, prefabricated fashion in the face of heavy stress. In a moment of resistance or conflict, our forebrain thinking capacity may be compromised by fight or flight physiology. The impact of stress can scatter our wits just when we need them the most. Keeping a basket full of ready-made reframes handy to buffer incoming stress can prevent our thoughts, feelings, and actions from taking a mechanical, conditioned, high-probability direction or form. Such reflexive responses rarely serve our long-term self-interests and are frequently self-destructive. Implicit in the idea of cognitive reframing is Carlos Castaneda's concept of stopping the world. Stopping the world is indeed an appropriate rendition of certain states of awareness in which the reality of everyday life is altered because the flow of interpretation which ordinarily runs uninterruptedly, has been stopped by a set of circumstances alien to that flow. In this case, the set of circumstances alien to our normal flow of interpretations is whatever reframe is being offered or invoked as a new perspective for the situation. Reframing helps us think outside of the box, generated by our immediate situation, conditioning, and mood. Reframing liberates us from predictable, high-probability thinking, feeling, and acting that may result from identification with only one particular view. In this series of videos, we will explore dozens of useful reframes that you can use to cope with the adversity you encounter in your day-to-day life. You can use them to transform the moment and change the lead in your life into gold. But first, a disclaimer. Cognitive reframing can be quite liberating for some people and lead to many insights and epiphanies. But of course, there's more to restructuring than having prepared alternatives. In the late 1990s, cognitive reframing in the clinical domain recognized the influence of core belief systems, or schemas, in determining how we as individuals perceive the world. These belief systems are formed unconsciously in the course of childhood development by the influences of heredity, our parents and family, the physical and cultural environment, and random events. These influences cause a child to inculcate a certain description of the world. A child's schema becomes fully operational when the child is capable of making all the proper perceptual interpretations, which, by conforming to that description, validate it. The idea that the perceptual interpretations have a flow is congruous with the fact that they run uninterruptedly and are rarely, if ever, open to question. That's why we need cognitive reframing. But if one doesn't understand his or her underlying core belief system and the reflexive, maladaptive strategies that he or she developed to compensate for the core beliefs, reframing results in more subtle iterations of the original misinterpretation. So you need to know what's behind the cognitions, interpretations of events, and what your thinking errors are based upon so that you can correct the core belief, not just the reinterpretation of a given event. However, that kind of work lies far beyond the scope of this video and really resides within the province of psychotherapy. The bottom line is that to get the most out of cognitive restructuring, you really need to identify, understand, and work on your core beliefs with a clinical psychologist. Nevertheless, with that said, most of the reframes explored in this series of videos are so general in their application to the human condition that we believe you can benefit no matter what particular schemas and core beliefs are shaping your perception. Reframe number 1, memento mori, using death as an advisor. Memento mori is Latin for remember that you have to die. The idea of using our inevitable and impending demise to bear witness upon and inform our thoughts, feelings, and actions is not new. The Stoics of classical antiquity were particularly prominent in their use of this discipline, and Seneca's letters are full of injunctions to meditate on death. The Stoic Epictetus told his students that when kissing their child, brother, or friend, they should remind themselves that they are mortal. And the mystic Gurdjieff restated Epictetus in this way: The sole means now for the saving of the beings of the planet Earth would be to implant again into their presences a new organ of such properties that every one of these unfortunates during the process of existence should constantly sense and be cognizant of the inevitability of his own death, as well as the death of everyone upon whom his eyes or attention rests. Only such a sensation and such a cognizance can now destroy the egoism completely crystallized in them. But of all the sages in all the traditions throughout history, no one has formulated and explored the implications of memento mori more poetically than Carlos Castaneda in the following quotations from his many books. "The thing to do when you're impatient," he proceeded, "is to turn to your left and ask advice from your death. An immense amount of pettiness is dropped if your death makes a gesture to you, or if you catch a glimpse of it, or if you just have the feeling that your companion is there watching you." Death is the only wise advisor that we have. Whenever you feel, as you always do, that everything is going wrong and you're about to be annihilated, turn to your death and ask if that is so. Your death will tell you that you're wrong, that nothing really matters outside its touch. Your death will tell you, "I haven't touched you yet." For me, the world is weird because it is stupendous, awesome, mysterious, unfathomable. My interest has been to convince you that you must assume responsibility for being here in this marvelous world, in this marvelous desert, in this marvelous time. I wanted to convince you that you must learn to make every act count, since you are going to be here for only a short time, in fact, too short for witnessing all the marvels of it. A warrior hunter knows that his death is waiting, and the very act he is performing now may well be his last battle on earth. He calls it a battle because it is a struggle. Most people move from act to act without any struggle or thought. A warrior hunter, on the contrary, assesses every act, and since he has intimate knowledge of his death, he proceeds judiciously, as if every act were his last battle. Only a fool would fail to notice the advantage a warrior hunter has over his fellow men. A warrior hunter gives his last battle its due respect. It's only natural that his last act on earth should be the best of himself. It's pleasurable that way. It dulls the edge of his fright. A warrior must focus his attention on the link between himself and his death. Without remorse or sadness or worrying, he must focus his attention on the fact that he does not have time and lets his acts flow accordingly. He must let each of his acts be his last battle on earth. Only under those conditions will his acts have their rightful power. Otherwise, they will be, for as long as he lives, the acts of a fool. Acts have power, especially when the warrior acting knows that those acts are his last battle. There is a strange, consuming happiness in acting with the full knowledge that whatever he is doing may very well be his last act on earth. The worst that can happen to us is that we have to die, and since that is already our unalterable fate. We are free. Those who have lost everything no longer have anything to fear. A warrior, or any man for that matter, cannot possibly wish he were somewhere else. A warrior because he lives by challenge. An ordinary man because he doesn't know where his death is going to find him. You have little time left, and none of it for crap. A fine state. I would say that the best of us always comes out when we are against the wall, when we feel the sword dangling overhead. Personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. In a world where death is the hunter, my friend, there is no time for regrets or doubts. There is only time for decisions. A warrior thinks of death when things become unclear. The idea of death is the only thing that tempers our spirit. In summary, there is no guarantee that we will live another month, week, day, or even hour. So much could go wrong. A drunk or distracted driver could hit us. We could suffer an unattended cardiac arrest or stroke. COVID could strike, as could a terrorist's weapon of mass destruction. Juxtaposing such scenarios against whatever we are thinking, feeling, or doing in the immediate present reframes these activities and thereby modifies their meaning and significance. What may have seemed of monumental importance a few seconds ago is now seen as petty, trivial, and unworthy of concern. If you really comprehended that you could die in 5 minutes, how would you like to spend that remaining time? With the clock ticking and knowing you can only think coherently of one thing at a time, what would you focus upon? Your spouse, your children, the beauty of your surroundings, or that Jane forgot your birthday again? So Memento Mori can help us focus upon what is essential and important in our lives and avoid wasting precious time on that which is trivial or unworthy. Memento Mori is a fantastic tool to transform the moment, but not the only tool. Watch for our next video in this series on Reframe number 2.